Picture yourself rushing through the streets of Manhattan at 8 a.m., coffee in hand, mind racing with deadlines, notifications buzzing relentlessly from your pocket. In this moment, you're not just navigating concrete and traffic, you're sculpting your very essence. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome nearly 2 millennia ago, understood this profound truth when he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Every idea, every flicker of curiosity, every moment of reflection shapes who you become. As you're watching this video right now, imagine a version of yourself that's sharper, more insightful, and bursting with newfound wisdom. This isn't some distant fantasy reserved for ancient philosophers or ivory tower academics. It's a tangible reality within your grasp, and today you'll discover 10 powerful Stoic techniques that can systematically elevate your intelligence. But what exactly did the Stoics mean by intelligence? For Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, true intelligence wasn't merely the accumulation of facts or the ability to solve complex equations. It was something far more profound, the capacity to navigate life's challenges with wisdom, to transform obstacles into opportunities, and to find clarity amidst chaos. It was the art of thinking clearly, observing deeply, and responding thoughtfully rather than reactively. Consider Sarah, a marketing executive in Chicago, who recently told me she felt overwhelmed by the constant stream of information in her daily life. Between client demands, social media updates, and endless meetings, she struggled to think clearly or make meaningful progress on important projects. Like many of us, she had fallen into the trap of confusing busyness with productivity, information consumption with genuine learning. The Stoics would have recognized Sarah's predicament immediately. They lived in a world of political upheaval, social change, and personal challenges that mirror our own. Yet they developed a systematic approach to cultivating what they called practical wisdom, the ability to see clearly, think deeply, and act purposefully regardless of external circumstances. What makes Stoic intelligence particularly relevant today is its emphasis on internal development over external validation. While our culture often measures intelligence through test scores, degrees, or professional achievements, the Stoics understood that true intellectual growth comes from within. It's about developing the mental habits and perspectives that allow us to learn from every experience, find wisdom in every challenge, and grow stronger through every setback. Epictetus, who transformed from slave to one of history's most influential teachers, demonstrated this principle beautifully. Despite facing circumstances that would break many people, he used his experiences to develop profound insights about human nature, resilience, and the path to genuine freedom. His famous declaration, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters," isn't just philosophical poetry, it's a practical blueprint for intellectual and emotional growth. Throughout this journey together, we'll explore how ancient wisdom can address modern challenges. Whether you're dealing with information overload in Los Angeles, relationship conflicts in Boston, or career uncertainty in Atlanta, these time-tested techniques offer practical solutions for expanding your mental capacity and deepening your understanding. If you're passionate about personal growth and ready to unlock your intellectual potential, take a moment to hit that notification bell and subscribe to STOIC VIVU. Together, we'll embark on a transformative journey that bridges ancient wisdom with contemporary life, proving that the path to greater intelligence begins not with what you know, but with how you choose to think. 1. Amor Fati, finding wisdom in life's constant flow. Sarah Martinez stared at her laptop screen in disbelief. The email from her Chicago marketing firm's CEO was clear. The company was restructuring, her department was being merged with another, and her role, the position she'd held for 3 years, was being eliminated. Her first instinct was panic, followed quickly by anger and then a sinking feeling of uncertainty. Like most of us, Sarah's immediate reaction to unexpected change was resistance, fear, and a desperate desire to return to the familiar comfort of yesterday. This scenario plays out thousands of times daily across American cities. Whether it's a tech worker in San Francisco facing industry disruption, a retail manager in Dallas dealing with automation, or a teacher in Denver navigating educational reforms, change arrives uninvited and often unwelcome. Our natural human tendency is to resist these shifts, to mourn what we're losing, and to fear what lies ahead. We cling to the known even when the known no longer serves us. But the ancient Stoics had a radically different perspective on change, one that can transform how we experience and respond to life's inevitable transitions. They called it Amor Fati, literally love of fate, the practice of not merely accepting change, but embracing it as an essential teacher. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal that would become the Meditations, captured this beautifully. Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. Consider what this means in practical terms. When Aurelius spoke of change as nature's delight, he wasn't being poetic for poetry's sake. He was recognizing a fundamental truth: everything in the universe is in constant flux. Seasons shift from summer's heat to autumn's crisp air. Technology evolves from smartphones to artificial intelligence. Even our favorite coffee shop might change its menu or relocate to a different neighborhood. Change isn't an aberration or interruption of normal life, it is the very essence of existence itself. The Stoics understood that every significant period of growth in our lives has been accompanied by change. Think about your own journey. When you moved from your childhood home to college, that geographical shift forced you to develop independence, adaptability, and new social skills. When you started your first job, the transition from student to professional challenged you to learn new competencies and ways of thinking. When you entered a serious relationship or started a family, these changes demanded emotional growth and expanded your capacity for love and responsibility. Epictetus, who himself experienced the ultimate change from slavery to freedom, taught that wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. This wisdom applies directly to our relationship with change. When we stop wanting things to remain exactly as they are, we free ourselves to see the opportunities hidden within transitions. We begin to recognize that our intelligence grows not despite change, but because of it. The key insight here is that change pushes us out of our comfort zones, and it's precisely in these moments of discomfort that our minds expand. When Sarah's job was eliminated, she could have spent months lamenting the loss and trying to find an identical position elsewhere. Instead, she chose to see this change as an opportunity to reassess her career goals, develop new skills, and explore possibilities she'd never considered. 6 months later, she launched her own consulting practice, drawing on skills she developed across multiple industries. Marcus Aurelius offered another profound insight: confine yourself to the present. When we're facing change, our minds tend to race toward worst-case scenarios or get stuck replaying past successes. But intelligence grows when we focus our attention on the present moment and ask, what can this change teach me? How can I use this transition to become more capable, more resilient, more wise? Practical application of Amor Fati doesn't mean becoming passive or failing to plan for the future. Rather, it means developing what psychologists now call cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt our thinking when circumstances shift. When your company introduces new software that makes your current processes obsolete, instead of complaining about the inconvenience, you can approach it with curiosity. What new capabilities might this technology offer? How can mastering this system make me more valuable and versatile? The Stoics also recognized that change often reveals strengths we didn't know we possessed. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." That marketing executive who loses her corporate job might discover she has entrepreneurial talents. The factory worker whose plant closes might find he has a gift for teaching others his technical skills. The journalist whose newspaper shuts down might realize she's perfectly positioned to start a podcast or blog. As you navigate your own changes, whether they're career transitions, relationship shifts, health challenges, or unexpected opportunities, remember that each change is an invitation to grow. Your intelligence expands not when life remains predictable, but when you learn to dance with uncertainty, to find wisdom in disruption, and to love the very process of becoming who you're meant to be. 2. The obstacle as the path, transforming resistance into growth. David Chun sits in his San Francisco apartment at 2 a.m., staring at lines of code that refuse to cooperate. He's been wrestling with a new programming language for weeks, one his company desperately needs him to master for an upcoming project. Every fiber of his being wants to give up, to retreat to the familiar comfort of languages he already knows. The syntax feels foreign, the logic patterns seem counterintuitive, and each error message feels like a personal attack on his competence. This is the moment where most people surrender, where the comfortable path of least resistance beckons seductively. Yet David is unknowingly standing at the threshold of one of philosophy's most profound insights. 20 centuries ago, Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This isn't merely inspirational rhetoric. It's a fundamental reframing of how we understand difficulty, struggle, and the very nature of growth itself. Our modern culture has developed an almost pathological relationship with discomfort. We have heated homes, comfortable cars, ergonomic chairs, and countless apps designed to eliminate friction from our daily lives. We can order food with a tap, avoid difficult conversations through text messages, and consume entertainment that requires no mental effort. While these conveniences have their place, they've also created a dangerous illusion that growth should be easy, that learning should be painless, and that intelligence can be developed without struggle. The Stoics understood something we've largely forgotten. Discomfort is not the enemy of growth. It is growth's most reliable indicator. When we feel that familiar sensation of mental strain, when we encounter ideas that challenge our assumptions, when we face tasks that stretch our current capabilities, we're not experiencing a problem to be solved. We're experiencing the very mechanism through which human intelligence expands. Epictetus, who knew intimately the relationship between hardship and wisdom, taught his students, "Difficulties show what men are. Therefore, when a difficulty falls upon you, remember that God, like a trainer of wrestlers, has matched you with a rough young man." This metaphor is particularly powerful because it reframes struggle not as punishment or bad luck, but as training specifically designed to make us stronger. Consider the neuroscience behind this ancient wisdom. When we encounter challenging material, whether it's David's programming language, a complex philosophical text, or a difficult conversation with a colleague, our brains literally rewire themselves. The struggle creates new neural pathways, strengthens existing connections, and builds what researchers call cognitive reserve. The discomfort we feel is actually the sensation of our minds expanding, of our intellectual capacity growing in real time. But here's where most people misunderstand the Stoic approach to difficulty. Embracing discomfort doesn't mean seeking out unnecessary hardship or glorifying suffering. It means recognizing that when we encounter genuine challenges in pursuit of meaningful goals, our response to that difficulty determines whether we grow or stagnate. Marcus Aurelius clarified this distinction. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The key is learning to distinguish between productive discomfort and destructive stress. Productive discomfort is what David feels when he's stretching his programming skills. It's challenging but purposeful, difficult but not overwhelming. Destructive stress is what happens when we resist that productive discomfort, when we tell ourselves we should find learning easy, when we interpret struggle as evidence of inadequacy rather than growth. Seneca offered practical guidance for navigating this distinction. Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" He was advocating for voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing challenging experiences to build resilience and expand our comfort zones. In David's case, instead of viewing his programming struggles as evidence that he's not cut out for this, he can reframe each error message as feedback, each moment of confusion as an opportunity to deepen his understanding. When he encounters a particularly difficult concept, instead of avoiding it, he can lean into the discomfort, knowing that this is precisely where learning happens. This principle extends far beyond technical skills. The marketing professional who volunteers to give a presentation despite her fear of public speaking is using obstacles as stepping stones. The introverted manager who joins a networking group despite his social anxiety is transforming his limitation into a growth opportunity. The recent graduate who takes on a challenging project despite feeling underqualified is following the ancient Stoic path of turning impediments into advantages. The Stoics also understood that our relationship with difficulty shapes our character in profound ways. Each time we choose to persist through productive discomfort rather than retreat to familiar territory, we're not just learning new skills, we're developing what Aristotle called practical wisdom and what modern psychology terms grit. We're proving to ourselves that we're capable of more than we initially believed. As you face your own obstacles, whether they're professional challenges, personal goals, or intellectual pursuits, remember that the discomfort you feel isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. It's confirmation that you're exactly where growth happens, where intelligence expands, and where the person you're becoming emerges from the crucible of purposeful struggle. 3. Otium, the sacred art of strategic withdrawal. Maria Rodriguez's phone buzzes for the 47th time today. It's 9:30 p.m. in her Manhattan apartment, and she's surrounded by 3 laptops, 2 tablets, and a stack of financial reports that need her attention before tomorrow's client meeting. As a senior analyst at a prestigious investment firm, Maria prides herself on being constantly available, perpetually connected, and relentlessly productive. Yet tonight, staring at the blur of numbers and notifications, she realizes something troubling. Despite consuming more information than ever before, she feels less intelligent, less creative, and less capable of the deep thinking her work demands. Maria's predicament reflects a fundamental challenge of modern American life. We live in what researcher Linda Stone calls continuous partial attention, a state where we're always monitoring multiple streams of information but never fully present to any single task. Our smartphones deliver an average of 80 notifications per day. Our workplaces celebrate multitasking as a virtue. Our social media feeds provide endless streams of content designed to capture and hold our attention. We've created a culture that mistakes constant engagement for productivity and confuses information consumption with genuine learning. The ancient Stoics understood something we've largely forgotten. True intelligence requires periods of deliberate disengagement. They called this concept Otium, not laziness or escapism, but the sacred practice of strategic withdrawal from external demands to create space for reflection, processing, and genuine thought. Marcus Aurelius, despite bearing the enormous responsibilities of ruling the Roman Empire, wrote extensively about the importance of internal retreat. Men seek retreats for themselves in houses in the country, by the seashore, and in the mountains, and you too are wont to desire such things very much. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men. For it is in your power whenever you shall choose to retire into yourself. This passage reveals a crucial distinction. Aurelius isn't dismissing the value of physical retreat, but he's pointing to something far more accessible and powerful: the ability to create mental space regardless of our external circumstances. True odium isn't about escaping to a cabin in the woods, though that can be wonderful. It's about cultivating the capacity to step back from the constant demands of modern life and create internal sanctuary for deep thinking. Neuroscience research has validated what the Stoics intuited centuries ago. When we're constantly switching between tasks and responding to stimuli, our brains operate in what scientists call the task-positive network, a state optimized for immediate reaction but terrible for creative thinking, memory consolidation, and complex problem-solving. However, when we deliberately disengage from external demands, our minds shift into the default mode network, where we process experiences, make unexpected connections, and generate insights that seemed impossible during periods of intense focus. Seneca, who managed vast business enterprises while pursuing philosophical wisdom, wrote extensively about the practical necessity of mental withdrawal. "Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company." Notice that Seneca emphasizes well-ordered mind. He's not advocating for disengagement as relaxation, but as a disciplined practice essential for intellectual development. Consider how this applies to Maria's situation. Instead of viewing her evening overwhelm as evidence that she needs to work harder or consume information faster, she could recognize it as a signal that her mind needs space to process what she's already absorbed. The Stoic approach would involve deliberately setting aside time, perhaps 20 minutes each morning or evening, to sit quietly without devices, allowing her thoughts to settle and her unconscious mind to work on the complex problems she's been wrestling with. This practice of deliberate disengagement takes many forms in contemporary life. It might be taking a walk without podcasts or music, allowing your mind to wander freely. It could be sitting in a park and simply observing your surroundings without the urge to photograph or share the experience. It might involve what some call analog mornings, starting each day with coffee and reflection before engaging with digital devices. The key insight here is that disengagement isn't the opposite of engagement. It's the complement that makes engagement more effective. Just as athletes require rest periods between intense training sessions for their muscles to rebuild stronger, our minds require periods of rest between intense mental work for our cognitive abilities to expand and consolidate. Epictetus taught that wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. This principle applies directly to our relationship with information and stimulation. When we can be content with fewer inputs, fewer distractions, fewer demands on our attention, we create space for the kind of deep thinking that produces genuine insights and creative solutions. Modern research on attention restoration theory confirms that our cognitive resources are finite and require deliberate replenishment. Dr. Adam Gazzaley's studies show that people who regularly practice what he calls cognitive control, the ability to deliberately direct and sustain attention, demonstrate superior performance on complex reasoning tasks compared to those who remain constantly reactive to external stimuli. The practical application of Otium doesn't require dramatic lifestyle changes. Maria could start by implementing what the Romans called ora quieta, a quiet hour each day when she deliberately disconnects from all devices and external demands. During this time, she might journal, meditate, take a contemplative walk, or simply sit quietly and allow her mind to process the day's experiences. As you consider your own relationship with constant connectivity and perpetual busyness, remember that the goal isn't to escape the world, but to engage with it more intelligently. By creating regular periods of strategic withdrawal, you're not being lazy or unproductive. You're following an ancient practice that creates the mental space necessary for wisdom, creativity, and genuine understanding to emerge. 4. Philosophia, the Eternal Student's Journey. Robert Thompson's retirement party was everything you'd expect for a beloved high school history teacher in Portland. Heartfelt speeches, nostalgic stories, and promises to finally relax. But 3 months later, sitting in his quiet house with nothing but daytime television and crossword puzzles, Robert felt something unexpected: intellectual stagnation. After 30 years of engaging young minds, he suddenly found himself wondering, is this it? Is learning over now that formal education has ended? This moment of existential questioning reflects a dangerous misconception embedded in American culture, the belief that learning has a finish line. We graduate from high school, earn college degrees, complete professional certifications, and unconsciously assume we've finished our education. The ancient Stoics would have found this notion absurd and deeply limiting. Epictetus, who transformed from slave to one of history's most influential teachers, declared, "Only the educated are free." But his definition of education had nothing to do with diplomas or degrees. For the Stoics, true education was philosophia, literally love of wisdom, a lifelong commitment to understanding ourselves, our world, and our place within it. This wasn't academic exercise, but practical training for living well. Marcus Aurelius exemplified this principle beautifully. Despite ruling the Roman Empire at its peak, he continued studying philosophy, writing daily reflections, and seeking wisdom from teachers and books. His meditations reveal a mind constantly questioning, learning, and growing. Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and rounded the seething waters are laid to rest. The neuroscience of lifelong learning supports what the Stoics understood intuitively. Our brains remain remarkably plastic throughout our lives, capable of forming new neural pathways and developing fresh capabilities well into our 80s and beyond. Dr. Michael Merzenika's research demonstrates that people who engage in continuous learning maintain sharper cognitive function, better memory, and more creative problem-solving abilities than those who stop challenging themselves intellectually. But what does genuine lifelong learning look like in practice? It's not about accumulating random facts or chasing every trending topic. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." True learning involves building upon previous knowledge, making connections between disparate ideas, and developing what educators call transfer, the ability to apply insights from one domain to entirely different situations. Consider Robert's transformation. Instead of viewing retirement as the end of his teaching career, he began seeing it as the beginning of his most intensive learning phase. He enrolled in online courses about artificial intelligence, started learning Spanish to communicate with his neighborhood's growing Latino community, and began writing a book about historical parallels to contemporary political movements. Each new area of study didn't replace his historical expertise but enriched it, creating unexpected connections and insights. The Stoics emphasized that every day presents countless opportunities for learning if we approach them with the right mindset. Epictetus taught his students to view every interaction, every challenge, every setback as a classroom. When Robert's computer crashed while he was working on his book, instead of simply getting frustrated, he used it as an opportunity to learn about data backup systems, cloud storage, and digital security. Knowledge that proved valuable in many other contexts. This approach transforms ordinary experiences into educational opportunities. The conversation with your Uber driver becomes a window into different life experiences. The frustrating customer service call becomes a lesson in communication and patience. The failed recipe becomes an experiment in chemistry and creativity. As Marcus Aurelius noted, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Modern technology has democratized access to learning in ways the ancient Stoics could never have imagined. Robert discovered online courses from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford available for free. He joined virtual book clubs with readers from around the world. He found YouTube channels that explained complex scientific concepts with clarity and enthusiasm. The barriers to learning have largely disappeared. What remains is the choice to engage. But the Stoics also understood that true learning requires more than passive consumption. Seneca wrote extensively about the importance of reflection, application, and teaching others. Robert began volunteering at a local literacy center, discovering that explaining concepts to adult learners deepened his own understanding. He started a blog about historical perspectives on current events, finding that writing forced him to clarify and refine his thinking. The key insight here is that lifelong learning isn't about becoming a perpetual student in the formal sense. It's about maintaining what psychologists call intellectual humility, the recognition that there's always more to discover, understand, and explore. This mindset keeps our minds flexible, our perspectives fresh, and our capacity for growth unlimited. As you consider your own relationship with learning, remember that every day offers opportunities to expand your understanding. Whether you're 25 or 75, whether you have a PhD or never finished high school, your capacity for growth remains unlimited. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to keep learning, it's whether you're curious enough to keep growing. 5. Gratiarum Actio, the intelligence of appreciation. Jennifer Williams finishes her 12-hour shift at Grady Hospital in Atlanta, her scrubs stained with the evidence of another intense day in the emergency room. As she walks to her car through the humid Georgia night, her mind races with everything that went wrong: the patient who coded unexpectedly, the family member who screamed at her for waiting times beyond her control, the equipment malfunction that delayed critical care. Like most healthcare workers, Jennifer has developed a mental habit of cataloging problems, failures, and frustrations, a survival mechanism in a high-stress environment that unfortunately spills over into every aspect of her life. This pattern of focusing on what's wrong, what's missing, or what's threatening isn't unique to healthcare workers. Modern American culture has trained us to be problem spotters, deficit detectors, and threat assessors. Our news feeds highlight disasters and conflicts. Our performance reviews focus on areas needing improvement. Our social media algorithms amplify outrage and dissatisfaction. We become extraordinarily skilled at identifying what's broken while remaining largely blind to what's working, what's beautiful, and what's worthy of appreciation. The ancient Stoics understood that this habitual focus on problems and deficits actually diminishes our intelligence in profound ways. When our minds are constantly scanning for threats and failures, we operate from what neuroscientists call a scarcity mindset, a mental state that narrows our attention, reduces creative thinking, and limits our ability to see opportunities and connections. Gratitude, they discovered, isn't just a nice feeling, it's a cognitive practice that literally expands our capacity for learning, insight, and wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, despite facing plagues, wars, and political upheavals, made gratitude a cornerstone of his daily practice. Each morning, he would reflect, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This wasn't naive optimism or denial of life's difficulties. It was a deliberate cognitive strategy designed to prime his mind for learning, growth, and effective action. Modern neuroscience has validated what Aurelius intuited. Dr. Robert Emmons' research at UC Davis demonstrates that people who regularly practice gratitude show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, complex reasoning, and creative problem-solving. Grateful individuals also demonstrate what psychologists call broaden and build thinking, the ability to see more possibilities, make more connections, and generate more innovative solutions to challenges. But Stoic gratitude isn't about forcing positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." The key word here is enjoy, not because everything is perfect, but because we've trained ourselves to recognize value, beauty, and learning opportunities even within difficult circumstances. Consider how this transformed Jennifer's experience. Instead of ending each shift by mentally rehearsing everything that went wrong, she began implementing what she calls gratitude rounds, deliberately identifying 3 things from her day that she could appreciate. Sometimes it was the successful resuscitation that saved a life. Other times it was the moment of connection with a scared patient's family. Often it was something as simple as a colleague's kindness during a stressful moment. This practice didn't make Jennifer naive about her work's challenges or reduce her commitment to improvement. Instead, it expanded her perspective, helping her see patterns and possibilities she'd previously missed. She began noticing how certain communication approaches calmed anxious patients. She started recognizing early warning signs that prevented emergencies. She developed more creative solutions to workflow problems because her mind was operating from abundance rather than scarcity. Epictetus taught that wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. This principle applies directly to intellectual development. When we approach learning from gratitude rather than desperation, appreciating what we already know while remaining curious about what we don't, we create optimal conditions for growth. Our minds become more receptive, more creative, and more capable of making the unexpected connections that characterize genuine insight. The practice of intellectual gratitude extends beyond appreciating positive experiences. The Stoics found value in every situation, including failures, setbacks, and disappointments. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When we can appreciate even difficult experiences as teachers, we transform every challenge into a classroom and every setback into a stepping stone. Jennifer discovered this principle when a patient died despite her best efforts. Instead of only focusing on grief and self-doubt, she also practiced gratitude for the medical training that allowed her to provide comfort in the patient's final moments, for the family's trust during their most vulnerable time. and for the reminder of life's preciousness that renewed her commitment to her calling. This approach doesn't minimize pain or loss, it contextualizes them within a larger framework of meaning and growth. Research by Dr. Martin Seligman shows that people who can find meaning and learning opportunities within difficult experiences demonstrate greater resilience, better problem-solving abilities, and more sustained motivation for personal development. Practical gratitude cultivation involves both daily reflection and in-the-moment awareness. Each evening, Jennifer writes 3 specific things she appreciated from her day, focusing on details rather than generalities. During her shifts, she practices micro-gratitudes, brief moments of appreciation for small kindnesses, successful procedures, or meaningful connections. As you consider integrating gratitude into your own intellectual development, remember that this isn't about becoming unrealistically positive or ignoring genuine problems. It's about training your mind to operate from abundance rather than scarcity, to see opportunities within challenges, and to recognize the countless learning experiences embedded within ordinary moments. 6. Contemplatio, the art of seeing beyond the surface. Michael Rodriguez stands on the observation deck of his Los Angeles architecture firm, surveying the sprawling cityscape below. As lead designer on a major downtown development project, he's supposed to be inspired by the urban landscape, but lately everything looks the same: endless concrete, repetitive glass facades, and traffic-clogged streets. Despite his architectural training, Michael realizes he's stopped truly seeing the city he's helping to shape. He's become what the Stoics would call a passive observer, looking without perceiving, glancing without understanding. This phenomenon of inattentional blindness affects millions of Americans daily. We drive familiar routes without noticing new businesses. We walk through neighborhoods without observing architectural details. We scroll through social media without truly processing what we're seeing. Our minds, overwhelmed by constant stimulation, have learned to filter out most sensory input as irrelevant noise. While this filtering helps us function in an information-saturated world, it also cuts us off from the rich learning opportunities surrounding us every moment. The ancient Stoics understood that true intelligence emerges not from consuming more information, but from observing more deeply. They called this practice contemplatio, the disciplined art of mindful observation that transforms ordinary experiences into profound learning opportunities. Seneca wrote, "Time discovers truth." But time alone isn't enough. We must actively engage with our observations, allowing patterns to emerge and connections to form. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial responsibilities, regularly practiced contemplative observation. His meditations are filled with detailed observations of natural phenomena, human behavior, and social dynamics. He wrote, "Observe constantly that all things take place by change." This wasn't casual people watching, but systematic study of how the world works, how people behave, and how systems evolve. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. Mindful observation literally rewires our brains for enhanced pattern recognition, creative thinking, and problem-solving. Dr. Judson Brewer's research at Yale demonstrates that people who practice contemplative observation show increased activity in the posterior cingulate cortex, the brain region associated with insight, self-awareness, and the ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. Michael discovered this principle when he began implementing what he calls architectural meditation, spending 30 minutes each morning observing a single building, noting details he'd previously overlooked. He started with the building across from his office, initially seeing only a generic commercial structure. But day by day, he began noticing the subtle interplay of light and shadow, the way pedestrians naturally flowed around the entrance, the relationship between the building's proportions and its neighbors. This practice revealed insights that transformed his design approach. He noticed how certain window configurations created more inviting street-level experiences. He observed how building setbacks affected wind patterns and pedestrian comfort. He discovered how material choices influenced not just aesthetics but human behavior. People lingered longer near buildings with natural textures and varied surfaces. The key to Stoic observation lies in what Epictetus called prosoche, sustained attention combined with philosophical reflection. It's not enough to simply look, we must engage our analytical minds, asking questions like, what patterns am I seeing? What connections can I make? What does this reveal about human nature or natural processes? This approach transforms everyday experiences into learning laboratories. The commute becomes an opportunity to observe traffic patterns, urban planning decisions, and human behavior. The grocery store visit becomes a study in logistics, consumer psychology, and social dynamics. The neighborhood walk becomes an exploration of architecture, landscape design, and community interaction. Seneca emphasized that contemplative observation requires both patience and systematic approach. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. The stopping Seneca describes isn't physical stillness but mental presence, the ability to fully engage with immediate surroundings rather than rushing toward the next destination. Michael began applying this principle beyond architecture. During lunch breaks, he would sit in downtown parks, observing how people chose seating, how they interacted with spaces, how environmental factors influenced behavior. These observations informed his understanding of human-centered design principles that couldn't be learned from textbooks or software programs. The practice extends to social observation as well. By watching how people communicate, collaborate, and resolve conflicts, we develop emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. By observing our own reactions to different situations, we gain self-awareness and emotional regulation capabilities. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Technology can either enhance or hinder contemplative observation. Michael uses his phone's camera not to mindlessly document experiences but to capture details for later reflection. He maintains an observation journal where he records patterns, questions, and insights that emerge from his daily practice. The Stoics also understood that contemplative observation naturally leads to what they called sympathia, the recognition of interconnectedness between all phenomena. As we observe more deeply, we begin seeing how individual elements relate to larger systems, how local changes affect broader patterns, how personal actions ripple through communities. This systems thinking, developed through contemplative observation, enhances our ability to solve complex problems, anticipate consequences, and make decisions that account for multiple variables. It's intelligence developed not through abstract study but through engaged interaction with the world around us. As you develop your own contemplative observation practice, start small. Choose one aspect of your daily environment, perhaps the building where you work, the park where you exercise, or the coffee shop where you read. Spend a few minutes each day observing the space with fresh eyes, noting details you've previously overlooked and asking questions about what you see. 7. Auditus Sapiens, the wisdom of deep listening. Lisa Chun sits in the glass-walled conference room of her Boston consulting firm, leading what should be a routine team meeting. But as her colleagues speak, she finds herself mentally preparing her next response, checking her phone for urgent messages, and thinking about the client presentation due tomorrow. When her team member Jake finishes explaining a complex data analysis, Lisa realizes with embarrassment that she heard his words but absorbed almost nothing. She nods and says, "Great work," but internally knows she's failed at one of leadership's most fundamental skills, truly listening. This scenario repeats across American workplaces thousands of times daily. We've become a culture of conversational multitaskers, simultaneously listening to colleagues while composing emails, hearing family members while scrolling social media, and participating in meetings while mentally reviewing our to-do lists. We mistake hearing for listening, presence for attention, and response speed for understanding. The ancient Stoics understood that genuine listening is far more than a social courtesy. It's a sophisticated form of intelligence gathering that can transform our understanding of others, ourselves, and the world around us. They called this practice auditus sapiens, wise listening that goes beyond mere sound reception to achieve deep comprehension and empathy. Epictetus, whose teachings were preserved by his student Arion through careful listening, offered this profound insight. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. This isn't merely a clever aphorism, but a practical formula for intellectual development. When we truly listen, we access knowledge, perspectives, and insights that no book, article, or lecture could provide. Marcus Aurelius, despite holding ultimate power in Rome, regularly sought out conversations with philosophers, soldiers, and citizens from all walks of life. His meditations reveal a mind constantly learning from others. Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest. He understood that listening with stability and presence allowed him to absorb wisdom from even the most turbulent conversations. Modern neuroscience reveals why deep listening enhances intelligence so dramatically. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research shows that when we listen with full attention, our brains activate mirror neurons that help us understand not just words but emotions, intentions, and underlying meanings. This neural mirroring creates what psychologists call theory of mind, the ability to understand others' perspectives, predict their behavior, and respond appropriately to complex social situations. Lisa discovered this principle when she began implementing what she calls listening meditation in her team meetings. Instead of preparing responses while others spoke, she focused entirely on understanding their perspectives, emotions, and underlying concerns. She started asking clarifying questions rather than making immediate judgments. She began paraphrasing what she heard to ensure accurate understanding before offering her own thoughts. The transformation was remarkable. Team members began sharing more detailed insights, revealing problems they'd previously kept hidden, and proposing creative solutions they'd been hesitant to voice. Lisa realized that her previous efficient meeting style had actually been incredibly inefficient. By not truly listening, she'd been missing crucial information that led to better decisions and stronger team cohesion. Seneca wrote extensively about the intellectual benefits of deep listening. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When we listen deeply to others, we often discover that our own assumptions, beliefs, and approaches need updating. This isn't threatening, it's liberating. Each conversation becomes an opportunity to refine our thinking, challenge our biases, and expand our understanding. The Stoics also understood that listening requires what they called ataraxia, inner tranquility that allows us to remain calm and curious even when hearing difficult or challenging information. Lisa learned this when Jake revealed that a major client was considering ending their contract due to communication issues. Her first instinct was a defensive reaction, but she forced herself to listen completely, asking questions about the client's specific concerns rather than immediately explaining why they were wrong. This approach revealed that the client's complaints weren't about work quality, but about feeling unheard during project meetings. Exactly the same listening problem Lisa had been experiencing with her own team. By listening deeply to Jake's feedback, she identified a systemic issue that affected both internal team dynamics and external client relationships. Deep listening also enhances what psychologists call emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and respond appropriately to emotions in ourselves and others. When we listen not just to words but to tone, pace, and underlying feelings, we develop sophisticated social awareness that improves our effectiveness in every relationship. The practice requires deliberate cultivation. Lisa began scheduling listening appointments, conversations with team members where her only goal was understanding their perspectives, challenges, and ideas. She discovered that these sessions, initially seen as time-consuming, actually save time by preventing miscommunications, reducing conflicts, and generating better solutions to complex problems. Epictetus taught that it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. Deep listening forces us to confront this limitation. When we truly hear others' perspectives, we often discover that situations are more complex, people are more nuanced, and solutions are more creative than we initially assumed. The Stoics also recognized that listening to others teaches us about ourselves. By observing our reactions to different viewpoints, we learn about our own biases, triggers, and assumptions. Lisa noticed that she became defensive when hearing certain types of feedback, impatient with detailed explanations, and dismissive of ideas that challenged her preferred approaches. This self-awareness allowed her to adjust her listening style and become more effective. As you develop your own deep listening practice, start with one conversation daily where your only goal is complete understanding. Put away devices, make eye contact, ask clarifying questions, and resist the urge to formulate responses while others are speaking. Notice how this practice affects both your relationships and your own thinking. 8. Silentium, finding clarity in the quiet spaces. James Patterson's Washington, D.C. apartment overlooks one of the city's busiest intersections where sirens wail at all hours, construction crews begin work at dawn, and the constant hum of traffic creates what he's learned to call urban white noise. As a political journalist covering Capitol Hill, James thrives on information, breaking news alerts, press conferences, committee hearings, and endless streams of social media updates. But lately, he's noticed something troubling. Despite consuming more information than ever before, he feels less capable of clear thinking, deep analysis, and the kind of insightful reporting that built his reputation. This paradox affects millions of knowledge workers across America. We live in what researcher Matthew Crawford calls attentional commons, shared spaces where everyone competes for our mental focus. Our phones buzz with notifications every few minutes. Our workplaces celebrate always-on availability. Our entertainment options provide constant stimulation designed to prevent any moment of mental quiet. We've created a culture that mistakes noise for productivity and confuses information consumption with genuine understanding. The ancient Stoics understood that true intelligence requires what they called silentium, not merely the absence of sound, but the cultivation of inner quiet that allows deep thinking, careful reflection, and genuine insight to emerge. This wasn't escapism or withdrawal from responsibility, but a disciplined practice essential for navigating complex challenges with wisdom and clarity. Marcus Aurelius, despite managing an empire spanning 3 continents, regularly sought what he called the citadel of the self, an inner sanctuary of quiet reflection where he could process experiences, examine his thoughts, and make decisions from wisdom rather than reaction. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This confinement wasn't limitation but liberation, freedom from the mental noise that prevents clear thinking. Modern neuroscience validates what the Stoics discovered through practice. Dr. Marcus Aurelius' research on the brain's default mode network shows that our minds require periods of reduced external stimulation to consolidate memories, process complex information, and generate creative insights. When we're constantly responding to stimuli, our brains operate in reactive mode, optimized for immediate response but terrible for deep analysis or innovative thinking. Seneca, who managed vast business enterprises while pursuing philosophical wisdom, wrote extensively about the necessity of regular silence. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. He discovered that many of his anxieties, worries, and mental conflicts were amplified by the constant noise of daily life. In silence, he could distinguish between genuine concerns requiring action and imagined fears that dissipated when examined clearly. James discovered this principle during a power outage that forced him to spend an evening without devices, internet, or his usual information streams. Initially frustrated by the inability to check breaking news, he gradually noticed something unexpected. His mind began processing the day's interviews and observations in new ways. Connections emerged between seemingly unrelated stories. Questions arose that hadn't occurred to him during his busy reporting schedule. Ideas formed that would later become some of his most insightful articles. This experience led James to implement what he calls information Sabbaths, regular periods when he deliberately disconnects from all news sources, social media, and digital communications. These aren't vacations from work but intensive work periods focused on reflection, analysis, and deep writing. He discovered that 1 hour of thinking in silence often produced more valuable insights than 4 hours of information gathering. The Stoics understood that silence serves multiple cognitive functions. First, it allows what psychologists call consolidation, the process by which our brains organize new information, strengthen important memories, and discard irrelevant details. Second, it enables incubation, the unconscious processing that often leads to creative breakthroughs and problem-solving insights. Third, it facilitates metacognition, thinking about our thinking, which improves decision-making and self-awareness. Epictetus taught that wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. This principle applies directly to information consumption. When we can be content with less input, fewer updates, and reduced stimulation, we create space for the kind of deep processing that transforms information into wisdom. James began structuring his days around what he calls silence anchors, specific times when he deliberately creates quiet space for reflection. His morning silence helps him prioritize the day's most important questions. His midday silence allows him to process morning interviews and observations. His evening silence helps him synthesize the day's experiences into coherent understanding. The practice doesn't require dramatic lifestyle changes or extended retreats. Even 5 minutes of intentional silence, sitting quietly without devices, walking without podcasts, or simply pausing between activities can provide significant cognitive benefits. The key is regularity and intentionality, treating silence as a disciplined practice rather than accidental occurrence. Seneca also recognized that silence reveals the difference between urgent and important, between reactive thinking and strategic planning. In the constant noise of daily life, everything feels equally pressing. In silence, priorities clarify, and we can distinguish between activities that merely keep us busy and work that genuinely advances our goals. The Stoics also used silence for what they called evening review, a daily practice of reflecting on experiences, examining decisions, and extracting lessons from both successes and failures. James adapted this practice, spending 10 minutes each evening in quiet reflection about the day's interviews, observations, and insights, often discovering story angles and connections that had escaped his notice during busy reporting. Modern research on attention restoration theory confirms that our cognitive resources are finite and require deliberate replenishment. Dr. Kaplan and Kaplan's studies show that people who regularly experience what they call soft fascination, gentle, restorative mental states often found in silence, demonstrate superior performance on tasks requiring sustained attention and complex reasoning. As you consider integrating silence into your own intellectual development, start small but be consistent. Choose one daily activity, perhaps your morning coffee, evening walk, or commute, and experience it in silence, allowing your mind to process, reflect, and simply be present without external input. 9. Diversitas, the wisdom of many voices. Angela Martinez sits in her Austin startup's open office space, surrounded by a team that looks remarkably similar to her. Young, tech-savvy professionals who attended similar universities, share comparable backgrounds, and approach problems with strikingly similar methodologies. As founder of a fintech company aimed at serving diverse communities, Angela has begun noticing a troubling pattern. Despite their technical expertise, her team consistently misses insights that seem obvious to their target customers. Their solutions, while elegant from an engineering perspective, often fail to address the real-world needs of the communities they're trying to serve. This scenario reflects a common challenge in modern American professional life. We tend to cluster with people who share our educational backgrounds, socioeconomic status, and worldviews. Our social media algorithms reinforce these bubbles by showing us content similar to what we've previously engaged with. Our neighborhoods, workplaces, and social circles often lack the diversity that could challenge our assumptions and expand our thinking. We mistake familiarity for wisdom and comfort for competence. The ancient Stoics understood that true intelligence emerges not from surrounding ourselves with similar minds, but from engaging with the full spectrum of human experience and perspective. They called this principle diversitas, the deliberate cultivation of diverse interactions as a pathway to deeper understanding and more effective problem-solving. Seneca, despite his privileged position in Roman society, regularly sought conversations with people from all social classes and backgrounds. He wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." But his definition of improvement was broader than most people assume. He recognized that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, a slave's insights about resilience, a merchant's understanding of human nature, or a farmer's knowledge of natural cycles. Marcus Aurelius, as emperor, could have isolated himself within palace walls, hearing only from advisors and courtiers. Instead, he made deliberate efforts to engage with soldiers, citizens, and even critics of his policies. His meditations reveal a mind constantly learning from diverse perspectives. We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. Modern research validates what the Stoics understood intuitively. Dr. Scott Page's work at the University of Michigan demonstrates that diverse teams consistently outperform homogeneous groups on complex problem-solving tasks. The key isn't just demographic diversity, but cognitive diversity. different ways of thinking, processing information, and approaching challenges. When people with varied backgrounds and perspectives collaborate, they generate more creative solutions and identify blind spots that homogeneous groups miss entirely. Angela discovered this principle when she began what she calls perspective audits, systematically seeking input from people outside her usual professional and social circles. She started attending community meetings in neighborhoods her app was designed to serve. She conducted informal interviews with potential customers from different cultural backgrounds. She sought mentorship from entrepreneurs who had built businesses in different industries and markets. These conversations revealed insights that transformed her product development approach. She learned that her app's emphasis on individual financial optimization conflicted with cultural values that prioritized family and community financial decisions. She discovered that her user interface assumptions, based on her own tech-savvy background, created barriers for users with different levels of digital literacy. She realized that her marketing messages, crafted for her own demographic, completely missed the concerns and motivations of her target audience. The Stoics also understood that diverse interactions challenge our fundamental assumptions about human nature, social dynamics, and problem-solving approaches. Epictetus taught, "It is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows." When we engage with people whose experiences differ significantly from our own, we're forced to confront the limitations of our perspective and the assumptions we've unconsciously adopted. This process can be uncomfortable, which is why many people unconsciously avoid it. It's easier to surround ourselves with people who validate our existing beliefs and approaches. But the Stoics viewed this discomfort as a sign of growth, not a problem to be avoided. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He understood that even difficult or challenging interactions could teach valuable lessons about human nature, conflict resolution, and personal resilience. Angela began implementing what she calls diversity challenges, deliberately seeking out perspectives that might contradict or complicate her existing assumptions. She joined professional organizations outside the tech industry. She attended cultural events in her city's diverse communities. She participated in online forums where people discussed financial challenges from perspectives very different from her own. These interactions didn't just provide market research, they fundamentally changed how she approached problem solving. She learned to ask different questions, consider alternative solutions, and anticipate unintended consequences that her homogeneous team had missed. Her company's products became more successful not despite this diversity of input, but because of it. Seneca also recognized that diverse interactions develop what we now call emotional intelligence, the ability to understand, relate to, and communicate effectively with people whose backgrounds and perspectives differ from our own. In our increasingly connected global economy, this skill has become essential for professional success and personal fulfillment. The practice requires intentionality and courage. It means attending events where you might be the only person of your background. It means asking questions that reveal your ignorance rather than demonstrating your expertise. It means listening to perspectives that challenge your comfortable assumptions about how the world works. The Stoics understood that this practice ultimately makes us more effective in all our relationships and endeavors. When we can understand and relate to diverse perspectives, we become better leaders, more creative problem solvers, and more empathetic human beings. We develop what Marcus Aurelius called sympathia, the recognition that all humans share fundamental experiences and challenges, despite surface differences. As you consider expanding your own circle of perspectives, start by identifying areas where your current network might be limited. Seek out professional organizations, community groups, or educational opportunities that would expose you to different viewpoints and experiences. Remember that the goal isn't to collect diverse acquaintances like trophies, but to genuinely engage with and learn from people whose perspectives can expand your understanding of the world. 10. Curiositas, the philosopher's greatest tool. Carlos Rivera stands in the emergency room of Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami at 3 a.m. staring at a patient's chart that doesn't make sense. The symptoms don't align with any obvious diagnosis, the test results seem contradictory, and his initial treatment approach isn't producing expected results. As a second-year medical resident, Carlos feels the familiar pressure to appear competent, to have answers, to project the confidence that patients and colleagues expect from doctors. His instinct is to stick with his initial diagnosis and hope for the best, but something deeper, a quality that will define his entire medical career, compels him to pause and admit three powerful words: "I don't know." This moment of intellectual humility represents one of the most crucial decisions any professional can make. In our culture of instant expertise and social media certainty, admitting ignorance feels like failure. We're rewarded for having quick answers, confident opinions, and unwavering positions. We mistake certainty for competence and confuse knowing facts with understanding complexity. But the ancient Stoics understood that true intelligence begins not with what we know, but with honest acknowledgement of what we don't know. Epictetus, whose teachings formed the foundation of practical Stoicism, offered this profound insight: it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. This isn't merely philosophical wordplay, but a practical principle that separates lifelong learners from intellectual stagnation. When we approach situations with predetermined conclusions, closed minds, or defensive certainty, we shut ourselves off from the very information that could expand our understanding and improve our effectiveness. The Stoics called this quality curiositas, not mere inquisitiveness, but disciplined intellectual courage that chooses exploration over assumption, questions over conclusions, and growth over comfort. Marcus Aurelius, despite holding ultimate authority in Rome, regularly questioned his own decisions, sought alternative perspectives, and remained open to changing his mind when presented with better information. Modern cognitive science reveals why curiosity enhances intelligence so dramatically. Dr. Matthias Gruber's research at UC Davis shows that curious states activate the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine that enhances memory formation and pattern recognition. When we approach situations with genuine curiosity rather than defensive certainty, our brains literally become more capable of learning, adapting, and generating creative solutions. Carlos discovered this principle when he chose curiosity over certainty with his puzzling patient. Instead of defending his initial diagnosis, he began asking questions. What symptoms might he have overlooked? What alternative conditions could explain this presentation? Who might have different expertise that could illuminate the situation? This curiosity led him to consult with specialists from other departments, research unusual presentations of common conditions, and ultimately discover a rare but treatable syndrome that his initial assumptions had prevented him from considering. The patient recovered fully, but more importantly, Carlos learned that intellectual curiosity isn't a sign of weakness or incompetence, it's the foundation of expertise. The most skilled physicians, he realized, weren't those who never encountered mysteries, but those who approached mysteries with systematic curiosity rather than defensive certainty. Seneca understood that curiosity requires what he called beginner's mind, the ability to approach familiar situations with fresh perspective. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." When we can set aside our existing assumptions and approach challenges with genuine openness, we often discover solutions that our preconceptions had hidden from view. This principle extends far beyond medical diagnosis to every aspect of professional and personal life. The marketing executive who assumes she understands her target audience might miss changing preferences and emerging trends. The teacher who thinks he knows why students struggle might overlook learning differences that require different approaches. The parent who believes she understands her teenager's behavior might miss underlying concerns that need attention. The Stoics also recognized that curiosity protects us from what psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls confirmation bias, the tendency to seek information that confirms our existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When we approach disagreements with curiosity rather than defensiveness, we often discover that apparent enemies can become teachers and conflicts can become opportunities for growth. Carlos began implementing what he calls curiosity protocols in his medical practice. Before making any diagnosis, he asks himself, "What am I assuming? What questions haven't I asked? What perspectives might I be missing?" He seeks input from nurses who often observe patient behaviors that doctors miss during brief encounters. He consults with colleagues from different specialties who might notice patterns outside his area of expertise. This approach has made him not just a better diagnostician but a more effective learner. Each patient interaction becomes an opportunity to refine his understanding, challenge his assumptions, and expand his clinical knowledge. His colleagues have begun seeking his input on difficult cases, not because he has all the answers, but because his curious approach often reveals questions that lead to breakthrough insights. The practice of intellectual curiosity also requires what the Stoics called ataraxia, inner tranquility that allows us to remain calm and open even when facing uncertainty or challenge. When we can approach unknown situations without anxiety or defensiveness, we create optimal conditions for learning and problem solving. Epictetus taught that true freedom comes from focusing on what we can control while accepting what we cannot. Curiosity embodies this principle perfectly. We cannot control outcomes, but we can control our approach to learning, our willingness to ask questions, and our openness to new information. As you cultivate your own intellectual curiosity, start by identifying areas where you might be operating from assumptions rather than investigation. Challenge yourself to ask, "What don't I know about this situation?" before jumping to conclusions. Seek out perspectives that might contradict your initial impressions. Remember that every expert was once a beginner, and every breakthrough began with someone brave enough to admit they didn't have all the answers. As we reach the end of our exploration together, imagine Sarah from Chicago embracing her career transition with Amor Fati, David in San Francisco transforming coding challenges into growth opportunities, and Maria in Manhattan finding clarity through strategic silence. These aren't fictional success stories. They're examples of what becomes possible when we apply ancient Stoic wisdom to modern challenges. Each technique we've explored represents not just intellectual theory, but practical tools that can transform how you think, learn, and grow in your daily life. The 10 Stoic techniques we've journeyed through, embracing change, welcoming discomfort, practicing disengagement, maintaining lifelong learning, cultivating gratitude, observing mindfully, listening deeply, seeking silence, engaging diverse perspectives, and choosing curiosity over judgment, form an integrated system for intellectual development. Like the stones in an ancient Roman arch, each technique supports and strengthens the others, creating a framework for continuous growth that has endured for over 2 millennia. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Every moment you choose curiosity over certainty, every time you embrace discomfort as a teacher, every instance you listen deeply rather than respond quickly, you're literally reshaping your mind and expanding your capacity for wisdom. This isn't a metaphorical transformation. Neuroscience confirms that these practices create new neural pathways, strengthen cognitive abilities, and enhance your brain's capacity for learning and adaptation. But here's the crucial insight that separates Stoic intelligence from mere intellectual accumulation: this journey never ends. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Your intelligence isn't a fixed quantity to be measured, but a living capacity to be cultivated. Whether you're 25 or 75, whether you're starting your career or transitioning to retirement, whether you consider yourself naturally smart or struggle with traditional learning, these techniques offer pathways to continuous growth and deeper understanding. The beauty of the Stoic approach lies in its accessibility. You don't need expensive courses, advanced degrees, or special equipment. You need only the willingness to approach your daily experiences with the mindset of a philosopher, seeing every challenge as a teacher, every interaction as a learning opportunity, and every setback as a chance to develop resilience and wisdom. As Epictetus taught, it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. Your journey to Stoic intelligence begins with intellectual humility, the recognition that there's always more to discover, understand, and explore. This humility isn't weakness but strength, not limitation but liberation from the prison of assumed knowledge. Which of these 10 techniques resonated most powerfully with you? Which challenge will you embrace first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights might inspire fellow travelers on this path of wisdom and growth. If this exploration of Stoic intelligence has sparked your curiosity and desire for continued learning, please subscribe to the STOIC VIVU channel and hit that notification bell. Give this video a thumbs up if these ancient techniques offer value for your modern life, and share it with friends, family, or colleagues who might benefit from this timeless wisdom. Remember, the Stoics understood that wisdom grows through community, that intelligence expands through sharing, and that the greatest insights emerge when we learn together. Your journey to Stoic intelligence isn't a solitary path, but part of humanity's continuous quest for understanding, growth, and wisdom. Together, let's keep learning, growing, and transforming ancient wisdom into modern strength.